Shabbat Shalom. It is such an incredible joy and blessing to get to learn with you, Rabbi Sonia Saltzman. I had a rabbinic crush on you coming into Hebrew college. It was such an incredible blessing. I had heard about your Torah, your wisdom, the insights that you bring, the way that you are able to pair just deep heart and insight with a connection to everyone that gets to listen to you. And every time I got to learn with you in the Hebrew College Beit Midrash, it was an incredible gift and blessing. And when I met Solomon, he kept telling me about this amazing rabbi that he got to work with at Ohabei Shalom. And what amazing Torah you brought and what an amazing gift it was. And I was rubbing it in a little bit last night that he had to be a touch about while I get to hear you today. So thank you so much for sharing your beautiful Torah, for blessing us with your wisdom, and for gifting us with an insight today. Welcome.
Well, that's an amazing introduction. I hope I live up to it. Thank you. So I'm sure that you're familiar with the saying, curiosity killed the cat. We say it when curiosity leads us down an unproductive or even dangerous path. However, in a fascinating interview with Professor Tal ben Shahar, an expert in the field of positive psychology, he offers this wonderful line. Curiosity might have killed the cat, but it keeps us alive. Curiosity, says this prominent researcher, is one of the great secrets of happiness. It ensures that even when we are alone, we're not bored. But also, says Ben Shahar, being curious about others brings new relationships, can help mend broken ones, and deepens connections. In today's Parsha, we see how curiosity not only keeps us alive in a metaphorical sense, but does so quite literally. We learn about the confrontation between Moses and the tribes of Reuven and Gad, who don't want to join in the conquest of Canaan with the rest of the Israelites. They want to stay behind with their large herds of cattle east of the Jordan. Moses, however, convinces them that it's their duty to fight, promising them Gilead, the land that they've requested after the conquest. We learn that the tribes come together to conquer the land and that Reuven and Gad subsequently settle in Gilead. But an interesting detail appears in the book of Joshua about what happens next. A report reaches the Israelites about Reuven and Gad having built an altar upon their return. Assuming that this altar is evidence of idolatry, the Israelites are ready to go to war. First, however, they sent Pinchas to investigate the matter. This is the same Pinchas who in last week's Parsha acted without hesitation, taking violent action to stop immorality and a plague. But here we see a very different Pinchas. Pinchas goes to the eastern tribes and asks, "What is this treachery? Why have you built an altar?" And they respond, "No, God forbid. This is not for sacrifice. It is a witness, a symbol of our connection to you and to God. We feared future generations would say, you live across the river, you are not part of the covenant. So we built an altar, not to divide, but to unite." And the Torah tells us, the words were pleasing in the eyes of Pinchas, and the delegation returned in peace. A civil war was averted because someone asked. Curiosity saved lives. And what's fascinating is that at the center of this story, as a model of curiosity, is none other than Pinchas. The rabbis of the Talmud note his evolution, highlighting the fact that Pinchas is always referred to as son of Eleazar the priest, except when he goes to speak to the eastern tribes. At that moment, he's called Pinchas the priest. At that moment, he is worthy of the mantle of priesthood he inherited from his grandfather Aaron, whose legacy was the pursuit of peace. It so happens that today, the 1st of Av is Aaron's yahrzeit. So how appropriate it is to remember his legacy of peace, which each of us is expected to emulate. In Pirkei Avot, Hillel teaches, be like the disciples of Aaron. Love peace and pursue it. Love all human beings and draw them closer to Torah. But the astonishing thing is this: the character trait that takes center stage, that Pinchas models as a foundational component of peace, is never explicitly mentioned in Torah or in rabbinic literature. That is what I mean by the curious case of curiosity. The word for curiosity is nowhere to be found in Torah or rabbinic literature. Nowhere, not once. I'm looking at Sigalit. She will confirm. We are familiar with many Hebrew words that refer to character traits in Torah, like the anava or the humility of Moshe, or the chesed or kindness of Abraham. But how many of us know the Hebrew word for curiosity? It's sakranut, a word which only entered the Hebrew language upon its revival in the 19th century. In Torah, curiosity is referred to with verbs such as to seek, to ask, to know, and to look. But even when this character trait isn't named, the Jewish story, as we all know, is grounded in the value of curiosity. From the very beginning, we are invited to be curious, to question. God models this for us when God asks Adam and Eve, Ayeka, where are you? Which is about much more than just physical location. We could even say that curiosity precedes revelation. It was Moses' sense of wonder that made him stop while tending flock to look at the bush that was burning but not consumed. Others might have passed this burning bush and not given it much thought, but not Moses. In a midrash, the rabbis tell us that God saw that Moses turned aside to look, and only then did God call to him. It seems that through the years, curiosity has remained central to who we are as a people. A recent study by the Pew Research Foundation showed that for Jews who reported that being Jewish was very important, 87% indicated that intellectual curiosity was either essential or important to their Jewishness. But while intellectual curiosity might be hugely an important value for many of us, given the internal divisions that continue to challenge us today, it's an understatement to say that we need to apply curiosity more broadly and more generously. In fact, this is what we're called to do during these days of Av, when we remember the infighting of our ancestors, which according to the rabbis is what led to the destruction of the temple. I'd like to offer a story that shows what applying curiosity more expansively might look like. 2 summers ago, I heard a recorded conversation between Rabbi Daniel Hartman of the Hartman Institute and an Israeli Arab colleague that has stayed with me ever since. They were talking about what needs to happen for there to be a greater degree of integration of Arab Israelis into the society at large. During the conversation, Daniel Hartman quotes the very famous teaching from Hillel, "What is hateful to you, do not do unto others," but argues that we should aim even higher. He suggests a reworded phrase, "What is hateful unto others, do not do unto them," replacing "unto you" with "unto others." Only when we listen with genuine openness and curiosity to what causes others harm, says Hartman, will we be able to treat them with the compassion and the respect that is at the root of Hillel's teaching. It applies not only in the public sphere, but also in interpersonal relationships. What could be more powerful, more healing for our relationships than being genuinely curious about what is hateful or not helpful to our friends and family members? I'm sure many of us have experienced situations where our behavior backfires because our intended kindness doesn't respond to the needs of the person that we are trying to help. Do you remember the moving piece that Rachel Goldberg Polin, the mother of Hirsch, wrote about living with the pain of her son's murder by Hamas? She wrote about people reaching out to her to share their pain caused by the loss of Hirsch and so many others, but also that people saw her as a vessel for the hurts they endured, sharing their own personal losses with her. She says, "I feel like I have third-degree burns on my skin, so when people grab me or try to hug me, it's not helpful for me at this time. I think this is confusing for the person offering themselves to me. I know it's coming from a benevolent place in their heart." And then she brings a teaching by Reb Shlomo Volpi, a 20th century Rebbe, best known for his writings on character development about true chesed, or kindness. He says it requires looking at the person in front of us and saying to ourselves, what does this person need? It's not about putting ourselves into someone else's shoes, but staying in our own shoes and with genuine curiosity, trying to understand what that other person needs. And as she herself acknowledges in this piece, it's so very complicated to do so successfully. We all fail at times. It's yet another way of saying that we need to aim even higher than Hillel's teaching. It reminds me of the short story, If Not Higher, by the famous Yiddish writer Ayel Peretz. The story is rooted in the animosity and distrust between the Litvaks and the Hasidim in 19th century Eastern Europe. In this story, a community of Hasidim believe that their Rebbe is so holy that he ascends to heaven each year during the penitential prayers recited before Rosh Hashanah to pray for his congregation. A visiting Litvak, a Jew who's cerebral and rational, as opposed to the Hasidim who emphasize prayer and spiritual ecstasy, seeks to mock the Hasidim and show that their claim is pure nonsense. So he follows the Rebbe, and what does he discover? The Rebbe disguises himself in peasant clothing and goes into the woods to chop down a tree. Pretending to be selling wood, he knocks on the door of a shack where a poor and elderly woman lives. He offers to lend her the few coins that he is charging, a gesture intended to preserve her dignity. She accepts, he lights the fire, and as it burns, the Rebbe recites the penitential prayers. The Litvak, who sees all of this, is so impressed that he becomes a disciple of the Rebbe. And when other disciples brag about the Rebbe ascending to heaven at the time of the penitential prayers, the Litvak adds quietly, if not higher. We too can ascend even higher when we channel our curiosity towards discovery and empathy, like the Rebbe does in this beautiful short story. I want to conclude with this ode to curiosity by circling back to the cat, whom curiosity might have killed, but as I said earlier, it keeps us alive and happy according to the latest research. And here, I'd like to share with you a more personal story, a story about my mother, who many of you might know, Renata Brailovsky. She's sitting right there. She has no idea. I'm going to say a few words about her. She is, and I'm also going to reveal her age, but she doesn't mind. She's proud. She's 95 years old and has what I would call an insatiable case of curiosity. She participates in various foreign language book clubs, goes to the latest exhibit at the MFA, and keeps up with technology, texting and receiving messages on her Apple Watch. Curiosity keeps her going, keeps her growing, learning, and happy to be alive. Even when she is alone, she's never bored. But the truth is that she's rarely alone, because the same curiosity that keeps her engaged in all sorts of activities keeps her making new friends, even at this stage in her life. And so, may we continue to be a people of sacred curiosity, like Moses, who turned aside in wonder to look and to discover, like Pinchas, who asked and didn't assume, like those who today teach us by example to listen for what others need rather than what we think that they want. And may our curiosity bring not only knowledge and happiness, but compassion, and most of all, peace. Shabbat Shalom.